Aaron had been driving for hours, his body feeling the weight of exhaustion as the miles stretched on. He had set out to surprise his parents by driving through the night, planning to arrive much earlier than they expected. But as fatigue set in, Aaron began to wonder if it had been a mistake. Back in his service days, he could run on mere catnaps during missions, pushing himself to the brink with little consequence. Now, losing just one night of sleep made him feel as though he could crash for days. Despite his mind still feeling sharp, capable of action at any moment, his body was reminding him that age was creeping up on him. His eyes scanned the road ahead as he rubbed the sleep from them. He wasn't too far from the next town, and the thought of stopping for breakfast, maybe a steaming cup of coffee, was tempting. Even with the car heater on, the chill from the spring-cold snap had made its way through to his hands, numbing his fingers. It was supposed to be warming up by now, but the weather felt more like winter than spring. He just wanted to get warm again, maybe take a nap before finishing the drive home. Aaron was lost in thought, anticipating that much-needed break, when something massive appeared in the road ahead. His truck screeched to a halt, tires slipping on the icy pavement. Heart pounding, he blinked, wondering if his tired mind was playing tricks on him. But no, there it was, unmistakable, standing in front of him. A bear. And not just any bear. This bear had a small baby in its mouth. For a split second, Aaron questioned his sanity. Was he hallucinating from exhaustion? How could a bear be holding a baby? His mind raced, struggling to make sense of the surreal sight. But the more he blinked, the more the scene before him remained unchanged. The bear stood there, its dark eyes locking onto Aaron's, and Aaron could swear there was something almost human in its gaze, pleading, desperate. The baby appeared unharmed, no blood, no visible wounds from the bear's teeth. But that didn't ease Aaron's worry. He was unarmed, and though his instincts told him to be cautious around a wild animal, he couldn't just leave the child in this situation. His heart urged him forward, no matter how dangerous it might be. Aaron stepped out of the truck and slowly approached the bear, hands raised, his voice low and steady as he spoke soothingly to the creature. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The bear didn't growl or make any aggressive moves. Instead, to Aaron's shock, it gently placed the baby on the ground. Then, as if to give space, the bear backed away toward the tree line, keeping a watchful eye on both Aaron and the child. Aaron rushed forward, scooping the baby into his arms. His heart sank when he realized the infant's skin was cold to the touch and tinged with blue. The child's clothing was soaked, and it wasn't clear how long the baby had been exposed to the elements. Fear gripped Aaron. Was the baby already beyond saving? The lack of marks on the child's body reassured him that the bear hadn't harmed the baby, but something was terribly wrong. His hands trembling, Aaron carried the baby back to the truck and retrieved his first aid kit. He had some basic medical supplies, but nothing suited for an infant. His training kicked in as he checked the baby's airway, his fingers working swiftly and carefully despite his nerves. The baby's chest rose and fell faintly, but the breaths were shallow and labored. Aaron quickly dialed emergency services, his voice urgent as he relayed the situation to the operator. "There's a baby here, barely breathing. I need an ambulance, fast." The operator assured him that help was on the way, but it would take time. The nearest ambulance was miles away. Aaron was on his own for the moment. Setting the phone aside, Aaron focused all his attention on the baby. He gently rubbed the back of the baby's neck, trying to stimulate a response. He tapped the infant's feet, trying to coax a deeper breath. After what felt like an eternity, the baby let out a weak gasp, then a louder, desperate cry. Relief flooded Aaron as the baby's color began to return, the blue fading from the tiny face. The bear, still hovering near the trees, seemed to sense the change. It stood on its hind legs, peering over at Aaron and the child as if to check if the baby was okay. Aaron turned to show the bear that the baby was alive, and the bear responded by sitting back down, its eyes never leaving them. Aaron carefully removed the baby's wet clothing, wrapping the child in his own thick sweatshirt. He held the baby close to his chest, using his body heat to warm the small, fragile form. But as the minutes dragged on, worry gnawed at him. The baby was alive, but Aaron had no way of knowing if there were deeper injuries or if the child had suffered long-term damage from the cold. He needed proper medical help, and fast. Finally, in the distance, Aaron heard the sound of an ambulance siren. His heart soared with relief. The paramedics arrived and quickly took over, assessing the baby's condition. They were concerned the child might have pneumonia from the exposure and rushed him into the ambulance for immediate transport to the nearest hospital. As they prepared to leave, one of the paramedics asked Aaron where the baby's mother was. Aaron could only shake his head. "I don't know," he said. "The bear had the baby. I think it found him in the woods." The paramedics exchanged glances, their expressions skeptical. Aaron knew it sounded crazy. Who would believe that a bear had found and protected a baby? But he had seen it with his own eyes, and the bear was still there, watching from the shadows of the forest. Once the ambulance pulled away, Aaron's mind shifted to the next problem. Where had the bear found the baby? Was the child's mother still out there, hurt or worse? The forest was massive, and Aaron knew searching it alone would be nearly impossible. He planned to report the situation to the sheriff once he got into town, but before he could leave, the bear made a sound, a low, almost mournful noise that caught Aaron's attention. Aaron turned toward the bear. It was no longer backing away. Instead, it seemed to be beckoning him, urging him to follow. For a brief moment, Aaron hesitated. The idea of following a bear deeper into the forest was absurd. But there was something in the way the bear looked at him, something that told him the animal wasn't finished with him yet. He had to follow. The exhaustion that had plagued Aaron earlier had vanished, replaced by a rush of adrenaline as he trudged into the forest after the bear. The terrain was rugged, overgrown with thick underbrush, but the bear moved steadily, pausing every now and then to make sure Aaron was still following. Aaron pushed through branches, his breath coming in sharp bursts as he navigated the uneven ground. The journey seemed endless, and doubt crept into Aaron's mind. Was he chasing a wild animal for no reason? Maybe the bear had simply wandered away, and Aaron was being foolish to think it was leading him anywhere. But just as he was about to turn back, the forest opened up, and he saw it. A car nose down in the river below. Aaron's stomach dropped. The car looked as if it had tumbled down the steep bank, its front end submerged in the cold, rushing water. One of the back tires was shredded, likely the cause of the crash. His heart raced as he moved closer, wading into the river toward the vehicle. There, in the back seat, was a woman, unconscious and slumped over. Aaron could tell she had tried to get to the baby, probably passing out after freeing the child from the car seat and opening the window just enough for the bear to pull them free. Aaron's mind reeled at the thought. This bear had saved the baby, but it was the mother's last desperate act that had made it possible. Without hesitation, Aaron forced the car door open and pulled the woman from the wreckage. She was still alive but barely breathing, a large gash on her forehead and blood staining her clothing. Aaron knew he couldn't leave her here, not in this state. Carefully, he carried her through the thick forest, making sure to avoid further injury as best he could. When Aaron finally reached his truck, he was surprised to find the bear had disappeared. It had stayed long enough to ensure the mother was found, but now it had returned to the safety of the forest. Aaron didn't have time to dwell on it. He called emergency services again, and they confirmed that no ambulances were available at the moment. There was no choice. He would have to drive her to the hospital himself. The drive felt endless, each moment filled with the fear that the woman might not make it. Her breathing was shallow, and there were several times when Aaron was sure she had stopped altogether. But he refused to give up. He had saved the baby. Now he had to save the mother. Finally, the hospital came into view, the red letters glowing in the early morning light. Aaron had never been so relieved. Medical staff rushed to meet him, taking the woman into surgery while the baby was treated in the emergency room. Aaron slumped against the wall in the waiting room, utterly drained. He had done all he could. Later that day, the sheriff arrived to ask questions, and Aaron took them to the crash site. They pulled the car from the river and confirmed the woman's identity, notifying her husband. Aaron's role in the rescue was over, but as he left the site, he couldn't help but glance back toward the forest. A shadow moved on the hill, and for a moment, Aaron thought he saw the bear watching from the distance. The days passed, and Aaron couldn't stop thinking about the mother and her child. He wondered if they had survived, if his efforts and the bears had been enough. He tried to push the thoughts away, but they lingered. Then, about a week later, his phone rang. The caller ID showed the woman's husband, and Aaron's heart raced. When he answered, it wasn't the husband's voice that greeted him, it was the mother's. She was awake, recovering, and holding her baby boy in her arms as they spoke. Both had survived and were expected to make a full recovery. Aaron's heart swelled with emotion, and tears stung his eyes. The mother thanked Aaron over and over, recounting the moments before she passed out, when she had seen the bear take her baby. She had thought it was a dream, a nightmare, but now she knew the truth, that they both owed their lives to that bear. A year later, Aaron was invited to join the family for a picnic in the forest near the river where the accident had occurred. It was a day filled with joy and laughter, and Aaron's heart was full as he watched the little boy, now walking, chasing butterflies and playing in the sunlight. It was hard to believe this was the same child he had saved from the brink of death. As the picnic wound down, Aaron looked up to the hill and saw a familiar shape, a bear, watching from the distance. It didn't approach, didn't linger, but Aaron knew in his heart that it was the same bear, ensuring the child was safe once more. Aaron left the picnic with a sense of peace. The bear had been a hero, and though it would never be able to tell its story, its actions had saved 2 lives. For that, Aaron would always be grateful.